I work in that building.
Were you in the building at the time?
Naturally, if I work in that building, yes, sir.
The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives. In other words, I'm the only person in the background that knows the truth, the truth.
Do you think it'll ever come out?
No, because unfortunately, the people that had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in the position I'm in will never let the true facts come above board to the world.
Now, these people are in very high positions, yeah?
Yes.
The contents of this video are very controversial, to say the least, but I want you to understand that I have a personal attachment to this particular event, as I have been part of 2 best-selling books on the topic in my past. So for me to say the things that I'm about to say, they were difficult, but I have to stay true to what the evidence shows me. Now, with that being said, the last thing that I want is for you just to believe what I'm saying. What I do want you to do is take this information and verify it on your own. The information that you'll see here comes from the National Archives and from the Library of Congress. They are readily available to anybody for free. Now, you'll hear my critics claim things like lookalikes. The individual that you see on the screen just happens to look like the other individual. And with that would mean that they have no relationship to the other people that are involved in the events, as they would be a random person that would just happen to be there at the scene. But you'll see the evidence is quite the opposite, as these individuals are linked together either by blood or by production, and they all know each other. That, combined with the supporting evidence of these family members and these individuals that are working as a group and appear repeatedly over and over in different unrelated events, show that there is a connection between the individuals that I talk about. My critics will attempt to have you believe otherwise, but they won't address the facts, the content of what I'm talking about. They'll just throw insults in an attempt to get me to trip up and become entangled with their bullshit. It's not going to happen. But if they want to keep on trying, more power to them. I hope they put all the resources into it and keep at it as long as they need to. That's just one more actor that we don't have to worry about. But anyway, back to this issue. The issue that we're talking about is the event that took place on November 22nd, 1963. Now, some of you might go, well, why are we talking about this again? Why can't we just put it to bed and let it rest? Well, here's the reason why. The same individuals that took part in that event are taking part in the events that you see today on your TV that you believe are real, but aren't. The same actors, yes, I mean the same actors that took a role in the alleged assassination of John F. Kennedy have appeared lately on our TV. And in fact, you know some of them very, very well. But we'll get to them in a minute. First, let's discuss what we were tricked into believing and exactly what it was they used to trick us. Now remember, there were no news media individuals in the plaza. They were about 5 cars behind the president. So the only thing that you saw on the news or in the newspapers were basically these. It wasn't until 1970s when Grodin and Dick Gregory showed the Zapruder film for the first time on national TV. Up until that point, there was only still photographs that were shown, but still, the only information that you have about this event even taking place comes from what the news has told you and what certain eyewitnesses that claimed to be there saw, and their testimonies don't match.
This is Mrs. Jean Hill of Dallas. Could you tell us what you saw?
Yes, Mary and I had come down to see the president this morning, and we tried to get a place where we could be away from everyone, and we, I guess, succeeded. As the car came down the hill toward us, he was on our side of the street, and the president and Mrs. Kennedy were in the back seat. They had a little dog between them looking at it. The president looked up, and just as he looked up, 2 shots rang out, and he grabbed his chest, and this real odd look came over his face, and he pitched forward onto her lap. And she jumped up over him at that and screamed and said, "My God, he's been shot."
It all happened in such a brief span. She said, "Oh my God, they killed my husband." Jack.
I immediately reacted by turning to look over my right shoulder.
We heard a shot. I turned to my left. I was sitting in the jump seat. I turned to my left to look in the back seat.
By turning to look over my right shoulder.
And there was just an instantaneous, sort of an instant's pause, and in the motorcade it momentarily halted, and 3 or 4 more shots rang out, and they sped away real quickly.
So unfortunately for us, we were duped into believing the media because we were very naive at that time. Now, as we can see the pieces and we can communicate via the web and talk to people and verify stories and pull archives, we can see that the story fails miserably. As you can see clearly demonstrated with those last few clips, people make mistakes and people lie. So what are we left with? The only evidence, in my opinion, that matters is the photographic and video evidence. Sometimes audio can be used, but audio is difficult because you have to know where the source came from, and you have to be able to trace back that source to make sure that the piece hasn't been altered in post-production. So we're just left with video and photographic evidence. But if you're familiar with Jack White's work, then you can't even trust that. But fortunately for us, the criminals made a mistake, and I caught it, and that's what I'm going to present to you.
My name is Jack White, and I have researched the JFK assassination since 1963. My special interest is the study of photographs of the assassination. Today, I present my most recent photographic analysis. It proves that the most famous evidence of the assassination, the 8mm movie taken by Abraham Zapruder at noon in Dealey Plaza 35 years ago, has been altered and parts of it fabricated. What has been called the time clock of the assassination now cannot be of any value in that regard.
It is fraudulent. So the information that you're going to hear today looks at the evidence from a different perspective. Not as per what happened that day or what the witnesses are saying happened that day, but exactly who the witnesses are and why they are saying what they're saying and who is behind this entire fraudulent event. Let me briefly explain ear biometrics and the use of it to identify an individual. Government agencies such as the INS have now adopted the ear as a useful part of the body to identify individuals. The reason why they use this is because they can identify a person from a distance and they don't need the individual's consent to do so. Since the face of an individual is the most changing part of the body over a period of time, to attempt to use that for identification is very difficult. The algorithms that are adopted into automated facial recognition software are flawed. They do not account for particular angles, or, of course, in the cases of a person wearing a disguise, they are very limited in their ability to accurately depict that person and their identity. Therefore, the most accurate way of evaluating a photograph per assessment of that individual's identity remains the human eye. Individuals that are interested in this field of study need to also understand photography techniques, post-production software, image editing techniques, as well as lens distortion, as those three are very key in finding fraudulent images and, of course, understanding the perspective change due to the lens distortion. Understanding of technology and how it has changed in photography is also beneficial as well, as we will see that these photographs come from a time when technology was not as advanced as the digital photographs that we have today. So you have to understand the pixel bleed and the medium that is being shown to you, either it be video, which will be a soft-edged black and white, or soft-edged color image, as compared to modern-day digital high-definition, sharp, clean, crisp images. When we look at the ear does not change on an individual until you hit around 60 years of age. At that point, the cartilage will start to break down and you will see signs of aging. There are external factors that are also need to be taken in consideration, especially when you're looking at twins, as the health of the individual will cause the skin tension to differ, and this is why even in twins you will not have the same ear. They will show the same traits, but there will be physical aspects of that ear that will change over time. Keep those in mind and understand that this information is again available for you to evaluate on your own time, as we are of course bound to the constraints of the time frame that we have allotted for video, so we will not be able to show you all the evidence here. Now let's talk about some common sense here. Common sense being, if I were to show you an individual that was involved in this that's supposed to be dead and they're not dead, you might say, okay, well, maybe they just looked like that person. Okay, I'll give you the first one. But you can't deny the rest of the evidence when it comes to the facial landmarks, the teeth, and everything else about the individual. But let's say I show you that person and then show you their wife currently today, and that wife happens to look like that same wife of that person back when this event took place. Coincidence is starting to get a little bit more difficult to stand by.
What's your basic plan?
Well, I really don't have one, because I think this house will always grow and should. It just seemed to me such a shame when we came here to find hardly anything of the past in the house.
When I watched the tour through the White House, I really laughed, because I had met Jackie. My husband had dated Jackie Kennedy, and I had met her several times, and when I met her, she didn't have that voice, and I thought, whoa, I mean, she just loves Marilyn Monroe, and she's copied the voice.
Well, Jackie tended to keep a lot to herself, but she did confide to Dr. Frank Finnerty, who was her secret therapist over the course of the Kennedy presidency, and she talked to him about many things, but it also included her awareness of Kennedy's womanizing. She mostly wanted him to know that she wasn't oblivious to it, that she was well aware of it.
But who might be the real Rosalind Carter? They talk about the steel magnolia. And I've got to ask you this question. Where's the magnolia?
Where's the steel? I think that started in the campaign. And once somebody writes that, it just keeps being picked up.
Is it more steel than magnolia or the other way around?
I don't know. I never have felt that I was steely.
What do you think the public perception of Rosalind Carter is?
I don't know. It's probably what people like you say. She's a steel magnolia. But it's not because I am.
Well,
For those of you that aren't convinced just yet, well, here's a few more people for you to look at.
Well, I was born on a cotton farm in East Texas, but we had livestock of all kinds. I was born around livestock. Now it's mostly cattle instead of farming, but it's in the rural part of East Texas in Panola County. I was born way out in the country, farm and ranch.
So you didn't have to learn to ride to make cowboy movies?
No, I knew how to stay on, I thought, but I stayed on most of the time.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't quite that. You see, those are the people that made the B pictures, and the people that made the little westerns, the kind of pictures we made. Those were the people in the early days of television that they called upon, because they didn't, like the pictures Miss Lancaster was in, maybe they'd take a scene and they'd take it over and over.
Yeah.
If we took a scene and it was right, we went to the next scene. And those are the people that made the early TV pictures, the producers and the directors of the B pictures, which move rather rapidly, and the little westerns.
It was brought to my attention that Tex looked similar to Jack Ruby from the JFK assassination. So I decided to do a little digging into his background and to see who he was, and did an ear analysis on him. Now, the ear analysis, the results were extremely similar to Jack Ruby's, to the point where I made a statement where I believe that he is either a brother or a very close relationship to the person playing Jack Ruby. This turned out to be an accurate statement. Let's get into Jack Ruby first, and then we'll discuss more about Tex and his whole role in this whole JFK event. I was shown this photograph recently by a friend of mine. It's of Jim Marrs, the best-selling author on the Kennedy assassination, of him dancing on one of Jack Ruby's stages at the Carousel Club when he was 20 years old. Now, this I thought was very odd because, of course, Jim would then know Jack Ruby, and that would be a little bit of an awkward situation since he's involved in the Kennedy assassination and is writing books about it. So I kept that in mind as a little bit of a clue, because I know who Jim is. I've done research on him many times. I've exposed him for being David Rockefeller Jr. several times. He also plays the role of Sheriff Arpaio in Arizona, and he started his whole career as Mayor Frank Rizzo in Philadelphia, where I'm from. So I know the man, I know the voice, and he's pretty easy to pick out when you know what to look for. And one of those things to look for is the vertical crease on his ear. Now, that's a genetic marker. It's also been described as a person that has a risk of heart problems, but that has not been proven yet. Needless to say, this is a genetic trait that him and his family members have. So it becomes a useful tool when you're identifying them, since they do like to wear disguises.
Win or lose, okay? But you don't have the courage. You're a real crumb bum. Put that on camera. You're a crumb bum, the three of you, and I challenge you. You're a coward. You're a yellow sneak. And if you want to, now what I say, let's forget all the rules of this great country we live in. I will go back to that war with the three of you. Just me. You're a crumb creep coward. You can't take, you won't stand up to him.
I'm standing up. We're not here to fight. We're here to get some answers to some questions. That's all.
I want to fight you.
Why is that?
Because you're a crumb creep lush coward.
You don't even know me, Mayor.
You are a lush. I can tell by looking at you.
Some guts. Come down here and meet me face to face. Let's see how you act then.
So knowing that Jim is David Rockefeller Jr. and he's standing on the stage dancing at Jack Ruby's club, I decided to take a look to see if Jack Ruby was David Rockefeller Sr. And if you look at the hair, that was the first thing that I noticed in the chin. That's David Rockefeller Sr. as Jack Ruby. Now, if you remember what I said when I did the ear analysis of Ruby and of Tex Ritter, I said that they had to be related because the ears were too identical. So I decided to start looking into the rest of the Rockefellers to see if Tex matched any of those family members. We find a match in Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller. So at that point, you start to understand that we have a pattern here. And of course, that made me start to look at the rest of the Rockefellers and the brothers to see who they're playing and if they match any of the individuals that are involved in the JFK assassination. Knowing the history of Tex Ritter, we know that he is also the father of actor John Ritter.
College student majoring in drama, John Ritter. John?
And if you're familiar with my work, you'll know that we've exposed John Ritter as Michael McKeon. Now there's a particular useful little tool that you can use when you're trying to expose these people and find out who they really are. And I don't think they really understood this little glitch in their armor when they were starting this. They can change their face as much as they want, they can put on as many costumes as they'd like, but the one thing that they have a hard time changing, and they can only do to a certain extent, is their spouse and their children. So it's inevitable that they're going to spend a large amount of time with their significant other and their children. So those children and those other people involved have to be brought into this situation, and they try to disguise them as much as they can, but most of them aren't professional actors, so they failed sometimes. So this is a tool that you can use for your benefit, and they are having a hard time countering that. As you'll see, I use it to match these people and get a positive on several of them, and it makes the investigation solid, as there's no way to explain that as coincidence. So we've now identified 3 Rockefeller members that are using pseudonyms and assuming different roles, some of them in politics as Tex Ritter, as Nelson Rockefeller, and of course others in the creative end like Jim Mars, David Rockefeller Jr. And of course then we have David Rockefeller Sr. playing Jack Ruby. So we see some acting and we see some Hollywood involved in this. So logically thinking, we'll look at Tex Ritter, Nelson Rockefeller, as the next person of interest to see who he is involved with and if he has any individuals that are associated with the JFK assassination. Now, looking at Tex Ritter's background, the background that we're told, that is, he comes from a very small town in Texas. From that same town, and happens to be his friend, is another individual who is considered the second most famous person to originate from that area. So that's where we'll look next.
I work in that building.
Were you in the building at the time?
Naturally, if I work in that building, yes, sir.
Back up, man. Come on, man.
No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I live in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy.
You're a Marxist?
Well, I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes, sir, and also other philosophers.
But are you a Marxist?
I think you did admit on an earlier radio interview that you consider yourself a Marxist.
Well, I would very definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is correct. But that does not mean, however, that I'm a communist.
What is the difference between the two?
Well, there's a great deal of difference. Several American parties in several countries are based on Marxism, such as Ghana. Certain countries have characteristics of a socialist system, such as Great Britain with its socialized medicine. These, then, are the differences between an outright communist country and countries which adhere to leftist or Marxist principles.
In your work with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, what are you advocating?
We advocate restoration of diplomatic, trade, and tourist relations with Cuba.
Jim Reeves, welcoming you back to South Africa is like saying hello again to an old friend.
Thank you, Neville, very much. It's so wonderful to be back. And even though it's quite early, as a matter of fact, I see the sun just peeping up. We have quite a crowd here, and the press, radio are well represented, and I'm very happy to be back.
I'm wondering if you know just how popular you are in South Africa.
Well, I did know, Neville. I hope I'm still as popular as last trip. We had such a wonderful reception for my last visit to South Africa.
You're particularly popular amongst the Afrikaans-speaking section of our community. I think perhaps, Jim, that is because you have sung so many songs in Afrikaans now, and I'm sure they admire your efforts in that direction.
Well, I hope so, Neville. I don't have a thorough understanding of the language, but
The top image that we have here is a sample of Lee Harvey Oswald's handwriting that is from the National Archives. Below it we have handwriting samples from Jim Reeves' own songs that he wrote that we can compare them to. There's the M. You can see we have the same M. Same M with the same hook. P's are the same. And that is the same and. The same M's again. same why. Very same why. There's no question Oswald is Jim Reeves. Many people are familiar with the scene of Oswald being shot by Jack Ruby as they were escorting him out of the Dallas jail. But what most people don't realize, and this has to do with movies, is that there are usually marks on the ground that have to do with your mark, where you have to do a certain scripted out event on that mark, because that's where the cameras are trained and they're ready for you to do whatever you need to do on that spot. The lights have been fixed, the set has been arranged, and that is the mark that you are to hit. So when you look at the footage of before Oswald's brought out of the Dallas jail, which many people have never seen before because they just don't even know it exists, but you can readily find it online. It's about a 13-minute clip, and you'll see the marks on the floor. You'll see the individuals lining up on their spots, and they're looking at the spot on the floor, making sure that everything's in place for when he comes out, and he hits the spot, and that's where the action happens. If you don't believe me, see for yourself. For the sake of time constraint, I'm going to fast forward to the particular points that I want you to notice before the shooting. In this frame, you can clearly note that there are two spots on the floor. That's where the action is supposed to take place between the two individuals, and then the one spot to the right of it is where the first individual is supposed to take his mark to begin with. Actor to the far left looking at the ground to make sure he's in his right spot. Actor to the far right looking at the spot.
This is news audio.
Director of photography or one of the production managers telling the actors they're in the way of the shot, and the one actor looking down at the spot again.
Don't close the door. I'm going to leave eventually.
Now an interesting thing happens. They've been told that the horn beep is going to be the sign for action, but there is a beep before that. I guess it's probably just a real car beeping that they all act to. See all their heads turn? Here, watch it again. But that was a false start, because then the real one happens and the real action starts. Now you'll hear another horn, and this was because they were actually having to move some equipment around, but they know at this point that it's not ready yet, so nobody really turns and looks because they know that the set's not set up. You'll notice nobody really reacts to this beep. You can clearly see both of the spots on the ground. The one to the right is the camera, supposed to be directed straight at the door, and that's where the first actor will be, where Jack Ruby will start, and the other spot on the floor to the left is where the action is supposed to take place. At this point you see David Rockefeller Sr. as Jack Ruby on this one spot that was to the right, standing there waiting for the signal. You will hear the horn beep twice. That's for cameras, and that means for the sound people to get their sound gear in sync, and for cameras to be fully rolling, and then you'll hear another beep, and that's for the action to take place. Right on cue and right on the spot.
Basement floor of the Dallas City Hall, and that's a scuffle on the basement floor. It seems to concern photographers.
Now notice the other mark on the floor underneath the actor to the right. That is where the arrest is supposed to take place, or the gun is supposed to be removed, and the camera is trained on that spot and focused and ready to go. And I hope you realize that's how history's made. It's scripted. Every major event in our history has been scripted. These individuals are part of a family. They're part of several families that go back many, many years to the beginning of this country, probably even beyond. They've been manipulating your perception of reality, and every historical event that you believe is fact has been scripted out and or has been manipulated to some degree by these family members. They write the history books. They teach the lessons in colleges as history professors, as you will see. They are the ones responsible for everything that you think is reality, but is not. And if you want to doubt what I'm saying is true, well, here's another example of manipulation of your reality by the same individuals.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you.
Seems like Robert Kennedy has been shot.
Now take this into consideration. You have Winkler, a Jew, playing the role of Ahmadinejad, an antagonist in the Middle East. You also have Winkler playing other roles, and one of them happens to be Sirhan Sirhan. The reason that that Palestinian male, Sirhan Sirhan, shot Robert Kennedy, so we're told, is because he was angry with the Jews. Come to find out, Winkler is about as close to a sir as you can get. Since he's not a British citizen, he has still been given the honors by the Queen, the highest honors that a non-British citizen can obtain. Keep those in mind when you're watching this, and you may find out who exactly is behind it all.
What you saw? Well, from what I saw, it looked fairly serious. He was definitely hit 3 times. The thing happened so quickly that there was another eyewitness standing next to me, and she is in shock now and very fuzzy.
There's the staff that was in the kitchen as he was coming through, and there was this guy leaning against a steam table, and Carl was pushing him. Carl Yucker, our captain, was pushing him by his left hand, trying to get him through the little crowd that was there, and all of a sudden, this guy jumped out, firing on. They let Carl jump out and grab the guy by the neck, and he let go of the senator, and the senator started to go down towards him.
Trying to get him, I guess he didn't figure he was caught anyway, so he just threw him in the bushes. But as he started to turn and walk away, he stopped and looked back at me, and I didn't know if he figured, well, I'll just let this poor guy go, or he has nothing to do with it, or, you know, I'm not out to kill everybody, just, you know, whoever gets in my way, I guess.
Touch of irony. The young man walking with the elder Hinckley is 30-year-old Scott Hinckley, John Jr.'s brother. He and Vice President Bush's son, Neil, are friends. They had planned to have dinner together in Denver tonight. The plans have been canceled. Stephen Gear, ABC News.
President's son to cease and desist from any future unsafe or unsound practices. Bush had no comment today, but he has steadfastly disputed charges that he voted to approve loans to his own business associates without revealing the ties to other bank directors.
I believe in the principle that if you didn't do anything wrong, don't admit to it.
Remember what I said. If you want to verify them, check their spouse. As you will see, he plays Louisiana Representative David Vitters. And if you're not familiar with this case, just look up the D.C. Madam scandal, where he was caught with a prostitute. Well, the prostitute happens to be played by his wife, and she went on the Alex Jones show and said she was going to reveal her client list, and the following day was found dead. So now you know another little bit about Alex Jones being fake and the rest of these individuals as being actors. And one more thing about Neil Bush, who plays David Vitters. He also plays Rick Santorum. And we see none other than his wife, A. Greenberg, is at Rick Santorum's pep rally.
And I didn't do anything wrong.
Still today, there were charges from Democrats that Bush's punishment was too lenient.
We're out $1 billion in terms of this big.
So, thanks for the dinner, and it's now my honor to bring to this podium a talented and good man, Rich Little.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't wait to get home and add you to my
resume as being an opening act.
Our institution. It seems to me the least we could say is you stay out of the business for 5 years. You don't come back in.
Believe me, I'm an impersonator, basically. Do a lot of impressions of people, and some of them are politicians.
What I particularly like about Canadians is the way some of them come down across our borders and take jobs away from our Mexicans.
The man who killed John Lennon is up for parole this week. Mark David Chapman could be interviewed by members of the parole board as early as tomorrow. It'll be his 7th parole hearing since the year 2000. And Chapman is serving a 20-year to life sentence for shooting Lennon outside the musician's Upper West Side apartment building in 1980. He was moved from Attica to a correctional facility upstate in May.
This SCLC representing Philadelphia, and I wrote the committee, and I told them if there's anything there personal, that as far as I was concerned, they could destroy it forthwith, as long as we could get a transcript of the items in there wasn't personal. So I haven't heard anything from the committee yet, but I think they'll like favorable.
Wondering who the hell you trust,
I'm not pleased at all that I have to report this one, but again, like I said, I have to stay true to the facts. And unfortunately, I was duped by this person, and so was many people across this nation for many years. And it's hard for me to even admit, but this one is painful for me, as you'll see why.
What do you think might be in those files? Do you have any inkling or any idea what they might contain?
I don't have any idea. I know the church committee come up with a bunch of files of damage to the FBI, and everything's damaged to me has done been published in Time magazine, publications like that. So I know there's nothing there damaged to me, so it must be favorable.
You figure they wouldn't suppress them if there was nothing there, I guess. Theory, yeah. You've spent, you're in administrative segregation here now, and we're talking about your life in prison. If we're talking about an escape, I'm sure. You spent so many years in solitary, and it's taken a toll. Do you feel that it has taken a tremendous toll on them physically, emotionally, mentally?
They say it's painful with all their expertise. A lot of time required, and the lack of technical expertise available in 1963. We now know that these arguments lack foundation, but researchers for many years have had no counter-argument available.
So I guess that does confirm the information of Jack White's findings that the Zapruder film is fake. He should know. But it just brings into question, did he find this out, or was he given the information by his handlers? Of course, that's speculation. We don't even need to know, because we don't have to go there, because we've proven the fact that the JFK assassination was itself bunk. So let's get back to Jim Reeves and the Kennedy assassination. A little bit of information on Jim Reeves. Shortly after he played his role as Oswald, and of course Jack Ruby then killed him, we see that Jim actually had a plane crash, so they say. Well, the thing about the plane crash is they, of course, added in a bunch of drama so it would make the story bigger and would keep the story alive when it comes to Jim Reeves fans. The plane, when it went down, for 2 days they said that they couldn't find it, and the FAA was directing people to the wrong area. Now, of course, the FAA knows when the plane goes down immediately. They know where it's at. So this is a lie, because there was no plane that went down. Now, the video that they show you of the crash is not even close to what a plane crash would look like. It's just some debris that's strewn about the woods. So as you watch that video, keep that in mind. And also keep in mind that there's a particular person that's attached to Jim that is also attached to another person in this event that died in a plane crash as well. We'll see who that is in a moment. But one more thing about Jim. Since we see that these individuals profit from their acting, don't forget about Jim's nephew. So we got Frank Rizzo, Sheriff Arpaio, Jim Mars, or David Rockefeller. You take your pick. Sings the blues. But sorry, if you want to hear it, you're going to have to go online and surf for it, because I'm not playing any of it here, because you know they will censor my video for copyright infringement.
That's all right, I don't know.
Oh, that's fine. Cut.
Cut.
Marina, what do you do all day?
All day,
How do you spend
I
your
try
day?
to help to clean house, wash diapers, little bit cook. I can't play if I want to go to shopping or every place. I can't to go.
Are they good children? How about you? Do they behave?
Yes, my children very good for me, and I think very good children for everybody, because Junior and Rachel is very quiet.
How do you
Listen.
speak to the children? In Russian or in English?
I speak with Junior. Many times I speak with Junior in Russian language. But sometimes if I know English words, I speak English.
2 years old?
Junior is 2 years old in February.
Rachel is...
She understands English and Russian, but she don't speak Spanish.
And Rachel is 3 months?
Rachel 3 months old.
So as you can see, she's being coached. She's an actor. She's not Russian. And you'll find out who she is in a moment. But first I want to talk about something that is a common underlying theme in all the events that these individuals create and fake. It's the creation of a nonprofit to go along with the victims of the so-called fake event.
No, this is my first interview.
Now, Marina, you've heard from a lot of people. They've written you, and a lot of them have contributed money for your future and for the future of Jimmy and Rachel. And you told me that you wanted to thank these people for having written you. And if you would like to do that, you can look in this camera over here and say whatever you would like to say.
I want to say very much, but my bad English don't give me to say so much. I want to say thank you for American people. Thank you from me and from my children. Now I am happy if American people help me and carry me. American people have very big
Each time I see you again, I
Patsy Cline. The same Patsy Cline that played with Tex Ritter and Jim Reeves. In fact, the day that her plane supposedly crashed and she died, this was 6 months before the assassination, giving her plenty of time to lose some weight to get down to where you see her when she plays Marina Oswald. She happened to be with, guess who that day? Tex Ritter. So, I have an interesting story to say about Marina Oswald, or Marina Porter, as she is known today. I met her and spent a weekend with her when Grodin and I were doing the book tours. And it just so happens that where we stayed happened to be Abby Rockefeller's house. Abby Rockefeller lives in Edgar Allan Poe's childhood mansion. So we spent the weekend with Marina when we were doing a symposium, and I spent a lot of time with Marina. Had breakfast with her, of course, and her voice and her accent seemed to be not quite authentic, but of course at that time I had no reason to doubt who she says she was. But she did seem to be very on edge, type of nervous that we were there. For whatever reason, you'll have to ask her that, but I'm assuming now it's because she was afraid that she'd slip and we would catch her in it. So that's my little bit of a story about Patsy Cline that you might find interesting. After the assassination, Oswald made it home to pick up a revolver, and then by foot he went to the movie theater where he was arrested. On his way to the movie theater, it is alleged that he shot Officer J.D. Tippit in cold blood in broad daylight. J.D. Tippit was a Dallas police officer, so they say. I say he doesn't exist. The only reason why these individuals do things like this is to include a money-making scam in all their events. That's one of the reasons why I believe that he went to the movie theater. Probably the movie theater owner got a kickback from it, and of course it's advertising for his theater. So, if you are familiar with my work that I've done on the Kermit Roosevelt being Walt Disney and also playing the role of Hitler, you'll know the work that I did on the Walt Disney house, his home, and the fact that Disney flipped the image of the home, both horizontally and vertically, to hide the fact that it is Hitler's home. So I began to think, who would be behind the faking of the Zapruder film? Who would have the technology, and who is part of these individuals' family members? Disney. So keep this in mind when you watch this next little clip, as the myth of J.D. Tippit is finally revealed.
Thank those who have sent so many beautiful flowers to the hospital. It is our hope that our friends who might wish to do this would instead contribute to the fund for the family of Officer Tippit.
working.